Welcome to another episode of Marketing Tips for Doctors. I'm your host, Dr. Barbara Hales, and today we have with us Morgan Hamon. Morgan Hamon is a very interesting person. He is he is one where most dentists focus on patient care, but running a profitable practice is a different challenge entirely. I'm sure you'd all agree. Morgan is a CPA and partner at Eisner Amper, and he has spent over 20 years helping dental practice owners take control of their finances. You know, whether it's dentistry or chiropractics or traditional medicine, we all know how to take care of our patients from the perspective of our specialty, but very few of us trained in business, and that tends to be our failing, especially when we finally get the hang of it. Bureaucracy like moves the bar. So this is where Morgan helps us out. He takes control of their finances, increases profitability, and navigates complex tax strategies. And I'd love to propose Morgan as a guest on not only my podcast, but if you guys have another podcast and it would be of value to your listeners, you might want to drop him a line. As the former president of HDA Accounting Group, he built a firm that grew to serve 900 plus dental practices across all 50 states. And now, following a merger with one of the top 20 accounting firms in the industry, he's continuing to help practice owners make smarter financial decisions. Ready to share practical, real-world financial insights for dental practice owners, Morgan will break down profitability, taxes, and leadership in a way that's easy to understand, helping dentists build stronger, more financially sustainable businesses. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Barbara. It's very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
On your podcast, Morgan, um, you normally talk about how to increase profitability by improving cash flow and reducing financial waste. How do you recommend doing that? How to achieve that?
Well, our approach is to really, for starters, look at the profit margin. What is that financial reward that the doctor is realizing from their practice? And once we know that number, then we have to set the goalpost, if you will, and decide if that's appropriate, if the doctor's happy with it. We definitely have some opinions on what's possible for dental practice, and we'll visit with the doctor. Sometimes more money isn't always their objective. Sometimes it's more time. But then once we decide, look, for the given the size of this practice, um, once we know that profit margin, we can then decide, look, is it above average? Is it right where we need to be? Or maybe it's just lower than everyone would like to see it. If it's in that final category, that's where we begin to diagnose. And from a financial point of view, there's two factors that impact profit. There's your expense structure, and then there's revenue. Right. So if we're diagnosing, it's one of those two. The go-to first place to look always is expenses. If someone's profit's not where they want it, it's like, where am I overspending? Where I think more often than not, it's more related to the revenue side of the profit equation. And if we're
Mhm.
talking marketing, that could certainly be a factor there too. Is there enough money in the first place coming in to realize an adequate profit margin? Or maybe it seems like there should be, but maybe that production's not being collected. Maybe we have some collection issues. We're not charging, billing, or collecting appropriately. So it's real important to diagnose which one it is. If there's a revenue issue, a collection problem, well then we don't need to go, you know, uh, give our supply representatives a hard time if that's not where our attention should be. So that's the overall process, Barbara, is, let's just decide where are we, and if some things need attention, then we have to diagnose and really decide where our limited time as the CEO of our business, where should we spend that time to have the best effect?
What are some costly mistakes that health professionals make? And like pointing it out, I'm sure is helpful, but how do you help them overcome that?
So first is to really identify what the issue is. So we'll continue on with our with my example here. Let's say we decide, look, it's, the expense structure looks okay, profit margin is low. Um, so we diagnose that. I diagnose that by looking at receivables. Are there, and generally, if we have a low margin, that'll often coincide with a large amount of receivables, particularly a large amount of receivables that are aging out. And so once we diagnose that, then we can come up with some action items. Some of those action items will be in my lane, the CPA lane, and sometimes they veer over into like a practice consultant lane. If receivables are the likely culprit, I often advise the doctors, say, look, we've got a large amount of receivables. If we're going to quantify that, in my opinion, in the dental world, if total patient insurance receivables, the complete total, if those exceed 1 month's of average production, I think that's high. When we peel back the onion, if you will, and we see a large amount of those receivables over 60 days, over 90 days, I advise, look, go to your practice software, print out every patient balance that is currently 61 to 90 as of today. Right. The reason I picked 61 to 90 is that that's recent. That means we saw that patient between 2 and 3 months ago. This is happening right now. If somebody's had their practice 15 years and we go looking over 90 plus, there could be stuff in there from 15 years ago. But if we look at 60 to 90, now we isolate that. This is activity that happened within the last 2 or 3 months. And the question you're asking yourself, you go one by one, why is this here? Was the insurance claim not filed correctly? Um, should the patient have received a statement? Um, I've heard stories of where, maybe it's a small town and the staff knows everybody, they know the patients, and they feel bad with them or bad for them. So they let them leave with maybe without paying. Maybe they're supposed to pay before they go. So you just have to look for anything systemic and hopefully identify a common cause. Um, and once you know that, then we can go to work on it. And this is where it might veer off into the consultant lane. We can diagnose as the CPA and the accountant. I can diagnose, but I can't operate on the practice. So if insurance claims just aren't being filed correctly, well, I've never done that. We're going to have to get some help to solve that. But it's really important just to find out, where should we spend that limited time we have.
How did you get into this to begin with?
Luck and opportunity. Um, one of our very first clients was a dentist that not only owned several dental practices, but also, had a seminar for dentists to help them because he was, fabulously successful. And so it ended up being just a good relationship where we got into the dental field. Just for me personally, it was just a really really good fit with dentists. I've always enjoyed working with business owners, professionals, and dentists in particular. So we just realized there's a lot of value you can add as a very niche specialist, laser focused on one industry. And it just so happened that we found our way to the dental space and stayed there, never looked back.
Okay, but when you were a child, maybe you
hmm
could say, I want to be a policeman or a
hmm
fireman. I mean, like the average child doesn't say, well, it's
No.
really exciting. You know, I think I'd like to be a CPA. It has a good ring to it.
Yeah.
So it's like, what happened?
Yeah. Well, so being a CPA was the last thing I ever wanted to be as a child. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. And so my family's all CPAs. My dad, brother, cousins. I mean, definitely in our DNA.
So you had no choice.
I was the rebel. All right, so I went to college. The Navy paid for my college,
Oh, that was great.
University of Arizona, and then the day I graduated college, I was commissioned as an officer and went right into the Navy. So I spent 11 years in the Navy flying F-18s. I was a West Coast guy. It was a lot of fun. And
A lot
but
of people, when they have that experience in their background, go on to fly commercially when they get out.
most of them did. Most most of my Navy buddies now are pretty senior captains with United and Southwest and
Well, why not
FedEx,
you?
but because it just didn't feel like a good fit for me. I mean, I love flying, but I just felt private industry was for me a better fit for myself. So I left the Navy, and that's what I did. And I ended up going back to school, got a master's degree in accounting, sat for the CPA exam. Along that time in there, my dad, career CPA, we were both honestly needing a job, needing something to do. So we basically did a startup, which turned into HD Accounting Group. Um, and so life takes you places, and you never pass up a life-changing opportunity. It was very clear when this all came to fruition, that look, if we apply ourselves, give it everything we have, this could be really special, and that's ultimately what happened. So, um, but to answer your question, yeah, going from being a fighter pilot to CPA, pretty unusual career track there. But I took accounting classes in my undergrad. I enjoyed it. I have an aptitude for it, and so do really well at it. It's a different challenge. But as a kid, to your point, Barbara, I said, if you looked ahead, I'm 54 here in a couple of weeks. So, when
Happy
you're 50,
birthday.
oh, thanks in advance there. But if you'd asked me as a teenager, hey, when you're 54, you're going to be a CPA, and work for this big firm. I would have said, no, that's not what I want to do. But what do you know? What do you know when you're 15?
No, you don't. It's, a lot of careers are just things that people just fall into from
Hmm.
exposure.
Well, there's a saying I've heard, over the years, including in the Navy, because even in the Navy, you don't quite know where you're going to end up. I mean, you go to on a Navy scholarship, there was no guarantee I was going to be a pilot. That's what I wanted. There's a little risk involved. You had to get good grades, work hard, hopefully get what you want. And then when you become a pilot and go into flight training, there's no guarantee you're going to fly F-18s. Like, you got to do a good job and have aptitude. So there was a saying that the Navy told us, listen, you're going to go needs of the Navy is kind of where ultimately where you're going to end up. You got to bloom where you're planted. All right. And so I've always thought of that, like wherever,
I
wherever
like
you're planted, you got to bloom where you're planted. All
I like
right.
that.
And then, if you work hard and maybe want to go a different direction, then you have that flexibility and opportunity.
What financial blind spots in health practices that could cost owners thousands? What are some of them, and
I,
how do you address them?
I think I think the most common is, our in our world, so private dental. These doctors receive an incredible amount of education and training and clinical skills. What they're not taught is how to run businesses. And so if they could be the most amazing clinician, and now they're owning a practice because they want what everybody wants when you own a business, right? You want to make a nice living. You want to have some control over your life. I want to be working towards something that's going to have value in the future. But nobody really teaches you how to do that. And unless you identify that as the separate skill set that you need to invest in and develop, you could struggle. Um, we work with a lot of startup practices, and over the years, we've had some really dig a hole early on because they don't understand the fundamentals of billing and collecting. And if that process is broken, and here's like a practical example, they're starting the practice up. We need somebody to bill insurance and make sure that's happening. So we're going to hire a billing insurance coordinator. I'm going to read the resumes, and okay, we're going to hire this person. This is it. Boy, they know it, but the doctor doesn't really understand it. They're hoping that employee understands it, and that employee really doesn't know. Like maybe they're really good at interviewing, they got a really nice resume, and they sure look busy at work, but it's just not happening. I mean, I've had difficult conversations with doctors where this is exactly what happened, and then 3 months into their startup, there's no money in the bank because that person is incompetent. But the doctor doesn't really fully understand that process to supervise them correctly. So I think it is, and it's complex. I mean, the insurance world, many of our clients could tell you it's like not their favorite aspect of the business, but you really have to understand it. So if there is, I went to a business seminar a long time ago, Barbara, and there was a saying I remembered very carefully, very well. In the seminar, and it said, "Look, when you own a business, you have to charge, bill, and collect. 2 out of 3 doesn't cut it." Think about that. You got to charge, bill, and collect. There's no partial credit for 2 out of 3. It's got to do all of them. And so the doctors where they don't have that established as well as they should in their practice are going to suffer financially. So that's one aspect where I think it's a real kind of a hazardous area, particularly for new practice owners. The other area, we've talked a lot about the revenue side of the profit equation. The other side is the expense side. If you over delegate that, I've seen that get some doctors into trouble too. Specific to a dental practice, if we just consider office supplies,
Mhm.
which, not a huge line item on the P&L. Generally, those office supplies should be less than 1% of total practice collections. We've seen practices where it's running like 4%.
Wow.
And you consider, if it's $1 million practice, $1.5 million practice, that turns up being a large amount of money. And the doctor just has no idea because they just say, hey, my people are going to order what they need. And then if that's the case, I've seen this so many times, I can tell you right now, we dive in Amazon every day. It's like an addiction. Hey, but it's only 60, $70. Yeah, but when you're doing it 3, 4 times a day, that adds up. I mean, we've dug into it, and it is like the Amazon list is just unbelievable. So we have to tell the doctor, you got to get a hold of this. It should not be a free for all for the staff to just get on an order. Should not be ordering box of gloves if you got a crate in the back room that under a bunch of stuff that nobody's seen.
People
So
get
that
people get boxes of gloves from Amazon.
Yeah, well, they get supply. You got to control your inventory. You don't want to buy things you don't need. I'm just using that as an example. You don't want to order supplies. And actually, that was kind of an incorrect example because that's dental supplies probably. But the point being is you got to control your inventory. You don't want to be buying things you don't need just because people are used to buying them. Or you know what, maybe they like getting on Amazon, but you got to control that on the expense side. Same thing with clinical supplies, although I will tell you that is a benchmark we closely track. Incidentally, that's been going down over the years, not up. Um, I don't know about medicals, that's not our world, but dental certainly is our world. But those have come down quite a bit and continue to go down. Um, just as a side note, but I think dentists are pretty attuned to monitor that one, but
Mhm.
there's some other line items that can quickly get out of control.
Yeah, you really have to keep a very strict eye on it.
Hmm.
I have a story that I would like to relate here,
Hmm.
and that is, well, for me, I had nurses that were placing orders when our supplies were down. They knew what we needed, but I was the only one that had control over the checkbook,
Hmm.
and consequently the bills. Because if you have the manager in your office, like write the checks, bills bills come in, they write the check for it. What do they care? It's not their money.
Hmm.
They're not really looking, or they're not aware of whether this is the correct invoice or not, because somebody else placed the order and they're just writing the check for it, and it's not
Hmm.
their money. So, that really is a recipe for disaster. And I would get these bills, and I would look at the surgical supply place that, said we got this amount of boxes for surgical gloves and gauze and whatever else. And I'd look at the name, and the name didn't mean anything to me. It wasn't the vendor that we normally used. And
Hmm.
so I would ask, one of the people that placed the order, and she'd go, no, I never dealt with them. The thing is this, that we would get, like scammers even then, like at least once a month. and you'd get a bill and everything looked like it was a bona fide bill, but it was a
Hmm.
scam. And
Hmm.
I would call them up and I'd go like, "Hey, I got this bill from you, for these surgical supplies." And they'd go, "Yeah." And I'd go, "So, do you mind telling me who you are? Because
Hmm.
you're not my
Hmm.
vendor." And they'd say, "Oh, you don't have to pay that. This is just an advertisement." I said, like, I don't really see anywhere on here that
Right.
it says advertisement. So, if they could collect, 2 out of 10, they're still making quite a handsome profit.
Hmm.
So, one way to cut down on that is, like, I know that as the professional, you are already working 25 hours out of every 24, but it's a mistake not to be aware of where the money is going out. And the scamming is just like a good example of that.
Hmm. What you just described is a professionalized accounts payable process in a business where, you should be paying off the invoice rather than the statement. You get an invoice, you pair that with a purchase order. Is this what we ordered? Did we actually get it? Is it in acceptable condition? Yes, 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 clear to pay. Most and our clientele, our private dental practice owners, they don't have accounts payable departments. So you're hoping you have a sharp office manager or administrative employees to be heads up. Many of our clients have their vendors on just auto pay on the credit card too. So, but that you raise a very good point. I think it's prevalent in just in the accounting world. We get all kinds of fictitious bills from saying, "Hey, this is Intuit, and you're about to expire, and we're going to take everything away." And yeah, you have to, and it's all nonsense, of course. You
Yeah,
have to
when
be
you look at
very,
that, it's
yeah.
parts in your mouth, and you want to take action.
Hmm. Right, but you raise a very good point. Is those types of scams I think prevalent in every industry and continue to be very creative. And the point is you really have to scrutinize every bill, like you said, and not just be in a hurry and just pay because they're counting on, that 10-20% of people to fall for that scam. So that's a really, really good point.
Yeah. So, you have a lot of experience and exposure to a lot of different practices. What would you say makes the difference between the successful practices and the rest?
I think it all comes down to the doctor and how well they run their practice, how effective they are as a business leader. It is a separate skill. And I think this applies to any small business, whether you're an accountant, an attorney, a doctor, your success is your technical skill, which like for my world, that's a practitioner, and in your world, our dentist world, that's as a clinician. Those skills are important, but it's your skill set as a business leader where we see the most successful clients. We know who they are, we can see it again, and it's not always the dollars, Barbara. Sometimes it's the whole package. Like if I I think of a close friend of mine, longtime client, does very well, very successful, very good dentist. Um, he works 28 precisely. It's 28 hours per week. And that's very important to him. And so more money, although he does very well, more money isn't the sole objective. Protecting that lifestyle is also objective. And he's in a position where he's got the full package and he can have it all. And it's because he's an effective business leader. He inspires his employees. He creates an environment people want to be. The patients feel comfortable. It's a great patient experience. He runs a good ship, has everything's very well designed. He invests in the practice, everything's state of the art. The employees look up to him. He leads from the front. He treats people well. Those are the doctors that have the most successful practices, in my opinion, is they're really good at leading their practice.
Absolutely.
Um, the clients that struggle, I think they are very likely I shouldn't say very likely. I think it's they may be a great clinician, but the business side is just maybe not their passion. Sometimes people buy a practice and they think, gosh, this just isn't what I thought it would be. I'd rather go back to being an associate. That can happen. Those are the practices that struggle, not because the person isn't smart and capable. It's just, that skill set, either they don't have an interest in it, they didn't acquire those skills, because you do have to acquire those skills. You're not born with them. You're not being a good clinician or being a good practitioner doesn't mean you're a good manager, a good
Oh,
leader.
that's true. Although, I really melted it down to the most simplest, ways to look at it. I
Mhm.
called my staff in, we're all together, and I go, "Oh, so we're just going to say it like it is. The more money I make, the more money you make. I
Right.
make no money, you make no money. See how that
Hmm.
works?"
Yes. All right. Yes. You have to have profit in order to share the profit.
So, for our listeners, what is one tip that you could tell them that they could implement right away?
Right away, I would say, unique to our world, private dental practice owners, make sure you have an effective end of day closeout to ensure that what was posted as collected in your practice management software is actually what happened. There should be a segregation of duties, so one person isn't responsible for the whole thing, and they should present that to you every day. This is what was posted in the practice software, and this ties directly to, let's say, the batch deposit slip from your credit card terminal. You need to be checking those numbers every day. Have the staff prepare it for you. You look at it. It will only take 5 or 10 minutes of your day. But when you do that, you set the proper control environment in your practice. It sets that tone at the top that we take this serious. This is professional business, and this is important and needs to tie out. So if the practice owner is just busy and just assuming there are managers, it's all going to work out somehow, I would say let's not do that. Develop an effective end of day closeout. Check it every day. Have it be very conspicuous that you're checking it every day. You'll sleep better at night. Your practice will run tighter, and you'll have the right tone at the top for your office.
Well, I think that that's a good tip. This is another episode of Marketing Tips for Doctors. You have been listening to your host, Dr. Barbara Hales, with Mark Hamon, and the way in which you can reach him will be in our show notes. It's been a pleasure to have you here today. Till next time.